You're watching Byline Wilmington on CBS 10 WILM. Here's your host, Don Ansell.
Okay, we're back. We're calling the show Clash of the Titans, for those of you who remember that far back. And we're offering three different perspectives on the Titan Initiative to build the country's third largest cement plant in the Castlehane area of New Hanover County. In our first segment, Dr. Bob Warwick, who is the chair of the Coalition for Economic Advancement, that's an organization that supports the Titan Initiative, was our guest. Now we're looking at the other side of the coin and someone that presents an opposing view of Titan coming to the region. Dr. Craig Galbraith is a UNCW professor. One of his specialties is entrepreneurship and economic development. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you this morning. Thanks for being here.
Yeah.
All right, before we get into the nuts and bolts of your perspectives on this, how did you get involved in this?
Well, again, my specialty at the university is economic development, particularly local economic development as it relates to entrepreneurship and technology and why companies move to certain areas, why tourists move to certain areas, and so forth. So this is right within my area of interest. I also do a lot of work with economic impact studies, and that was a very important part of the piece in terms of the state and the county offering incentives to have Titan move to the area.
Okay, now you were in the studio when our first segment was, we were doing our first segment with Mr. Warwick. You have a very different perspective than our first guest. What are some of the main points that you disagree on that we heard from Bob Warwick?
Well, I think there's probably two different, although somewhat related points. The first is simply the analysis of the economic impact. I think we heard in the previous segment that environmental studies are very extensive. They take a long period of time. I think there was a toxicology study that Mr. Warwick mentioned was 900 pages long. We don't have any requirement for economic impact study. I've seen the economic impact study that was done for this particular situation. It was done literally the day before. It's about a third of a page long. It actually analyzes the wrong industry. It doesn't analyze cement manufacturing, but analyzes other industries as a proxy. Uses a technique that it can only look at a positive side, and certainly there are a lot of negatives that are
Now you're
possible.
talking about what the economic impact of Titan Cement starting up in the region, what that impact would be on the economic impact on the region.
That's absolutely correct. The bottom line in economic impact is basically jobs created, and in that original study, I think it mentioned that Titan would bring 160 jobs into the community, and the economic impact would be 720. There would be a multiplier effect, so to speak, of 720 jobs. And I completely disagree with that. I think that, I do this type of work. I'm also familiar with a lot of studies that have been done to look at the impact of plants moving into kind of developed areas. And probably the economic impact would be negative. In fact, we may lose jobs in this particular area. Or at least, maybe by my calculations, very quick calculations, maybe 160 jobs would actually create a net of 46 jobs. But again, there are no requirements.
Because, stretch that out to...
Sure.
The net loss would be 46 jobs because...
Sure. Well, there are a lot of, you don't just have positive things happening when a plant moves to an area. You do have some potential positives. You have people who have jobs, they then spend money within the area, and so you have this multiplier effect, which are the positive sides. The economic impact study that was done in this case only looked at that aspect. But there are a lot of negatives that can occur too. These are called dispersive effects. These are effects where if you build a plant, let's say, within a community, people may not want to live around that particular plant, and so they move out and property values go down. You could have congestion within the not only the economic situation, but also on the roads and things like that.
Have you done any research on the kind of impact Titan or similar operations have had on other places where they've located?
I personally have not done specific impact on Titan, but there have been several studies that have been done, very extensive studies that have been done that have been published just quite recently. Probably the best one was one that looked at 100 plant relocations in Georgia. And what the actual economic impact is. And again, it shows that it's negative, typically for industrial plants, or maybe a very, very small positive if you look at a broader region.
how much significance is size when it comes to it's being called the country's third largest cement producing plant? Would a smaller operation be acceptable from your frame of reference?
Well,
or?
again, there really hasn't been a study done. Again, we're talking about thousands of pages of environmental impact studies, but there really hasn't been a proper economic impact study. A proper one is very complex. You have to look at a lot of different things. Simply to look at a large cement plant to move into an area that really doesn't even have a cement plant. In fact, North Carolina doesn't even have a cement plant. You simply cannot look at the analysis in the way that it was done. It requires going out to other states and looking to see what happened economically to those communities, and then tie that to our kind of special, unique situation here.
Now, Bob Warwick is not an environmentalist or plugged into the environmental community per se. You are not either. You're more on the economic side.
Right.
But do you believe that if Titan's allowed to operate here, that it will be an environmental risk to the region?
Well, it's hard for me to say. I do have a graduate degree in environmental biology also, and ran a biotechnology firm prior to coming to UNCW. We don't know if it's going to be an environmental risk. From an economic point of view, the fact that it has a potential of being an environmental risk has a negative economic impact. Certainly it's the sort of thing that might discourage other more high technology service type of industry to move into the area. Or if there in fact is a environmental problem, then that's a disaster economically. And so those are facts that do kind of follow into determining the economic impact.
We have like 20 seconds. I have one more question. How much of a trade-off should communities make from your perspective when considering economic development versus the environment? It's always a trade-off.
There has to be a vision. The basis of all economic policy and land use is you have to have a vision for a community. What is the vision of this particular area? If it's high technology service, we have to design our economy around that particular vision. Right now we have economic anarchy. Within a simple drive through the community and the commercial districts shows that we basically have economic anarchy and no real clear vision of what we want to be. Everything has to tie into the vision.
We're out of time in this segment. Craig Galbraith, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Next segment, Ted Davis Jr., Chair of New Hanover County Commission, will join us, and we'll talk about the public policy part of the puzzle. Stay with us.